And just so you know, I will be recording this workshop. So if you don't want to be in the video, or you don't want to show your face for whatever reason, you can definitely turn off your camera. Let's see here. Before I do begin with today's Resume 101 workshop, I do want to invite you guys to take advantage of the workshops that we constantly offer. We really strive to provide you with the most up-to-date information when it comes to workforce, things that are going on in every industry. So if there is a specific workshop that perhaps you would like to see and we do not offer it, please do reach out. Or if you just want to find out more about the type of workshops we're going to be offering in the month of February, please email us at theachievementacademy@sdhc.org. Or if you just want to find out more information regarding our workshops, by doing this, we can also send you the Zoom link so you can be prepared for you to join us during the workshop time. As I mentioned, we will be discussing resumes, and just this workshop, I think it's a good workshop for anyone, even if you do already have a resume, just to kind of remind you the purpose of a resume, the importance of having either whether it will be a functional or a chronological resume. It depends on what type of experience and what type of job you're applying for. I think one of the things that sometimes as in the workforce, I should say, that is always a huge concern and also confusion is sometimes you don't know if you have the most appropriate resume for the job you're applying. A lot of times, I personally have assisted participants that feel that having one resume for any jobs that they want to apply for is the best option. And the reality is that you need to tailor your resume to the type of position you're applying for. So that means that if you have a solid, structured resume, you can always modify that to be tailored to that job that you're interested in applying, but make sure that you're not sending the same resume to all the different uh, possible jobs that you're interested in. Because what's going to happen is there's times when recruiters or even HR personnel won't even take a look at your resume if they feel it's something that it's just being sent without really showing how your skill sets or your work experience links to what they're trying to offer in that specific job. So keep that in mind as I'm going through this workshop. During today's workshop, you will learn the following. You will learn what a resume is, types of resumes, the sections within the resumes, the do's and don'ts, and also I will show you some examples of a finalized resume. One of the things that you need to know is with the resume, ultimately what you're doing is that you're introducing yourself to employers. It's kind of the best way I like to describe it is it's like your business card. You're introducing yourself to an employer that has never heard of you, or even if they have, even if in the past maybe you were, or know someone from that employer. It's your way. It's your way of introducing yourself, but you also want to make sure that you're introducing yourself the right way, whether it's highlighting not only your best achievements, but at the same time making sure that you're reading those job descriptions to make sure that you are compatible with that job or that you have the required skill sets to apply for that job. I know sometimes we have the desire for a specific job and you're like, I want that job. But then you look at the job description, you look at your experience, and sometimes it's like, well, um, maybe I might want that job, but the reality is that my experience and skills at this moment doesn't really match or it's not compatible with that specific role. So what I always advise my clients is to kind of take a step back and kind of think about what they have to do in order to be more compatible with that type of job that they are seeking, rather than just to send a resume to send it. Within the resume, You will, the main goal is to introduce yourself to the employer, to give a brief written summary of your work objectives, your experiences, your skills, but it should never be a document that talks about your personal life story. You're not gonna be talking about, well, 10 years ago I had this experience, or I've had difficulties, or I have a criminal record, whatever the case may be. The purpose of the resume is to really shine and to have an opportunity to talk more about your skill sets and get the opportunity to also get that job that they're offering. So it's definitely your in your best interest to make sure that you're brief, that you try to exemplify and emphasize the importance of your achievements and also your experience and skills as well. That's a resume in a nutshell. Of course, there's different segments within that resume structure, and this is a typical resume that you would see. This is what I like to call as a standalone or a standard resume that kind of has a summary of your current work experience or even volunteer experience. Because sometimes within the workforce, sometimes people forget that just because you may not have experience that where you actually got paid for doing something doesn't mean you cannot reflect that on your resume. You may have a vast amount of voluntary work that's closely related to that job that you're interested in applying for. So keep that in mind. Just because you hear the work experience component, and sometimes I have a lot of clients that state that, you know what, I've never really had an experience that I can really talk about where I actually got paid for something. And I'm like, you know what? I'm pretty sure there's been something that you've done where you've learned or you've applied a specific skill set that helped you when it came to assisting others, or more importantly, being able to do a specific role. So within the typical resume, you'll see in the first thing is the summary of your experience. Now, after that, whether you've worked 20 years in the customer service industry and you have a wealth of knowledge working with others, or you have some experience in management, that's pretty much where you summarize what you're going to be really going into detail during the resume segment. So after you do your resume, you'll see your work experience. We'll talk a little bit more about what type of work experience you should put, especially if you decide not to do a chronological resume, which I will go into in a later slide, or if you want to do a functional. Uh, Perfect. Thank you, Juanita. Talking about the work experience, there's usually a lot of feedback that really rely there's a lot of feedback that we get from a lot of employers and just HR professionals that's have suggested that when it comes to work experience, you probably should not, even if you have 10 jobs that you want to highlight, you should probably stick to, I would say, three at most, to highlight in your resume. You also don't want to have a resume that's 3 pages. um, I'm not a I think that as a professional in this industry, I've never really seen it as a bad thing if you have 2 pages as a resume or even three. But I know that a lot of HR personnel and employers that I've spoken to in the past have given me that feedback that sometimes when recruiters only have anywhere between 7 to 10 seconds to review a resume, if there's not something that really captures their attention immediately, they're not going to take the time to really read 2 or 3 pages. Having said that, I've seen amazing resumes that are 2 pages long, back and front, um, that just capture people's attention, whether it's the type of words they use, the description, even the font for that matter. I would just say that just to be consistent, I always recommend for you to do a max of 3 work experiences if you do have those. And if you don't, of course, don't lie about it. Talk about any type of volunteer work that you have, and you can be very specific. Instead of putting work experience right here, you would just put volunteer experience, because that's valuable as well. And then after that, in a typical resume, you'll see education, and then you'll see any additional qualifications. As I stated earlier, this is your typical standard resume, someone that perhaps may not have that much of experience doing resumes, and doesn't mean that it's a bad resume. It's your standard resume. From this should be the starting point for you to kind of segue to structuring a resume that you're going to be able to continuously update, for you to not have to reinvent and redevelop a resume every time you want to apply for a new job. Because if you are in that situation, that's not only taking time out of your busy schedule, but at the same time, sometimes there's jobs that are great opportunities, but you found out the last day. And if you don't have a solid resume and now you have to create one, you're going to be in a tough situation. You always want to have something that has been solidified. It's a final draft, and of course, from that you can kind of adjust it to better suit you when you apply for that specific job. Now, talking about the different types of resumes, when you start getting to a point where you know what, I kind of want to highlight the last 5 years because I've been in only 2 jobs or 3 jobs the last 5 years. One of the things that I always recommend, especially if you're applying for a job that is looking for, sometimes you see job descriptions that say looking for someone that has 2 years experience as a office specialist, or as a welder, or a year of as a plumber. Doing a chronological resume is really going to help you, and that's pretty much what they're looking for when they are requesting for X amount of years in that specific role. And this is where you list your work experience in order based on the dates of your work. You would of course start with the most recent position, and then you would make your way down to the oldest. The focal point of a chronological resume is for you to focus on your work history. That's literally the core, or the meat of the resume, of a chronological resume itself, is to focus on the history. And perhaps by focusing on your work history, you can show that you have a vast amount of experience as an office specialist. Maybe you've been working 20 years in the industry, and if an employer is looking for someone that's experienced and seasoned, and not they won't have to really do a lot of hand holding. They might look for someone that provides them with a chronological resume. It's going to be easier for them to identify someone that has been working in the industry for X amount of years. I One of the things that I also mentioned to my participants is make sure that when you do a chronological resume, that you do go based on what your experience is. I've had experiences where individuals have put, let's say, a job that they're, of course, the job that they're currently working on, but then they go back 10 years and they've bypassed like 5 different positions because they feel like those positions only won't take them to a next, or I should say, let me take a step back. It won't really help them when it comes to emphasizing the importance of their experience, because perhaps they're working in the fast food industry and they're like, well, how does that going to benefit me if I'm applying for office specialist job? In that instance, what I recommend is, instead of doing a chronological resume, then you should be doing what's called a functional resume, which I will go into detail. And that's why it's important for you to identify the differences between a standard or standalone resume, a chronological resume, and a functional resume. Because if you end up submitting a chronological resume and you do what I just mentioned, which is bypass 4 or 5 positions because you don't feel that the skill sets that you learn in those positions are going to help you to get that job, then there's going to be a gap in between what you're currently doing and the position that you're going to be placing. So they might ask you, well, it shows that you're working here, but then the last job that you also stated, it was 15 years ago. Does that mean that you did not work for 15 years? What happened within that gap? And you're going to run into the issue where employers are going to, one, ask you. And if you don't have a good reason behind that, because there is times where people, life happens, things happen that have not worked for 2 or 3, 4, 5 years. And in that instance, that's when we rather focus on a functional resume rather than a chronological resume. Chronological resume is when you do have a rich and vast experience for you to emphasize. Make sure that when you do the work history, it is steady and just kind of it's reinforcing what I just mentioned, which is make sure that it is steady and consistent and progressive. One of the things that I want to point out is that if you are able to see the difference between that standalone resume and a chronological resume, they are pretty much the same thing. If you look at the structure with the summary, the work experience, the education, and the additional qualifications. But the difference is that within the work experience section, that's where you would do it in a chronological order. So that's what differentiates that from the standalone resume. Now, the functional resumes. These are probably more popular nowadays, especially if you've gone through a process of now working for a year or 2 years. I know a lot of the current participants that were serving at the Achievement Academy and that some of my colleagues have shared are struggling because either they got laid off due to COVID or they want to go back to the job market, but maybe where they were working before, they had been working there for 15 years and now things are more difficult to work in that industry, or maybe they're like tired of working in that specific industry. Now they want to shift to a different industry. So I always recommend, and this is probably one of the most popular resumes because for that reason, a functional resume really, really focuses on the relevant experience and additional qualifications rather than on your years of working in a specific industry or what have you done in the last 5, 10 years. So the focus is skills and abilities which are listed at the near top instead of employment history, because what you want to do, once again, as I mentioned earlier, if recruiters or HR professionals are stating that they only spend about 7 to 10 seconds as they're screening resumes, you want to make sure that when you're doing a functional resume, you put in your best skills and abilities immediately. So when they skim through the summary, the first thing they see is you have experience with framing, with finished carpentry. You have experience doing a custom cabinet for purposes of this example for Joe Doe. You need to make sure that you capture their attention immediately. So this section is going to be the crucial component of this type of resume. You typically use a functional resume when you have gaps in employment. Someone that perhaps was laid off back in April, May of last year may still consider doing it chronological if they feel that their experience working in a specific role is more impactful when they're applying for a specific job, because they're like, well, you know what? I've been a manager in retail for 15 years. I think it's more important for me to do the chronological so they see that I'm not new to the game. But I would argue that a functional resume could also serve the same purpose, because that person could potentially highlight their management skills and their abilities in the same way as if they were to do it in a chronological resume. So just keep in mind that while there's differences, you need to understand that you need to pick the one that best suits you. And by doing that, you'll be able to have the ability to structure any future resumes or updating a resume for you to apply for the different jobs that you may be seeking. So that's why this specific workshop is uh, such a great opportunity for you to kind of go back to the drawing board and make sure that if you already have a resume or you feel, oh, my resume is good to go, I'm good, that you kind of go and rethink that. I always suggest that you have at least an extra set of eyes, or maybe two people to review your resume to kind of give you a different perspective, because sometimes we're so stuck in, well, this resume has to work for me and I'm good to go. But things are changing always within the workforce. So if you're not up to date with what employers are looking for, what the industry is shifting to be, then you're losing an opportunity for you to be really competitive. Um, these type of resumes are also recommended for people that are re-entering the workforce, such as individuals that perhaps have been laid off and maybe they took a couple of years to kind of go to school, but now they're ready. So this is a good resume to use. And at the same time, if you have a variety of unrelated jobs, maybe you worked in retail, then maybe you also worked in the food fast food industry, maybe you work in construction, sometimes you're like, well, how am I really gonna emphasize the skills that I learn in each one without really affecting my ability to really be competitive, because maybe now I'm applying to be a office specialist, and what are those three different industries to have that I could have potentially learned that can I can apply for the new job, and doing a functional resume gives you that ability. Note one thing before I move on. Note that after you put your relevant experience and you put your additional qualifications, whether you have an additional certification, maybe if you're working in the healthcare industry, and maybe you're a certified nurse assistant. Now you also got your phlebotomy license, and you're maybe even EKG, an EKG tech. Now you're looking at the possibility of being able to apply for different types of sites that may be looking for not only your typical CNA, but maybe they're looking for someone that has experience monitoring patients' EKG results, or they're a lot of hospitals nowadays are looking for individuals that are able to read those results that they give back once they hook up a patient. They call them teletext, and if you're just a CNA but don't have that additional training, that might cost you the opportunity for you to be considered. However, if you put that in the section of additional qualifications, that's going to be something that's going to pop up. And definitely when recruiters or HR personnel is reading the resumes, it's going to really flag your resume, and they're going to look more into your resume and spend more time. So I always highlight the importance of doing that. And at the same time, keep in mind, you still have to put your employment history, but because the focal point is skills and abilities, the employment history is more towards the end. And then after that, the education, of course. Within the resume, there's different sections where you would be putting in your contact information, which will be on the top with your name. And then nowadays, before they would say, it would be a good idea for you to put your address, your home address, but um, I think the consensus is just because of safety and just people's privacy. A lot of people just decide to go and put their city and state, their phone number and email address, which is, not a bad idea. Let me see. Um, at the same time, when you're putting that information, understand that you need to make sure that you don't put an email that you don't check on a regular basis. But I think the thing to note here is you also don't want to put an email that might seem a little bit either childish, offensive. I mean, if you are trying to be taken serious, you need to make sure that your email is a reflection of yourself. And when you're looking for a job or an opportunity, and it's in any type of industry, you need to make sure that you put your best foot forward, and you don't want to put in those. I mean, I see it on a daily basis. I've been in interview panels where I'm reviewing a resume and I'm hearing what this person's saying, which is great. And perhaps the person's really good at interviewing and the skills are there. But then I look at other components such as an email, and it might seem like a minor thing, but it puts things into the context of, well, if this person didn't take the time to spend 5 minutes to either create a new resume, a new email, or just not use this email, maybe use another email um, to send in the resume. For me, it shows that the person is really not um, it's not very careful when it comes to the presentation of their type of work. So please, please, please make sure that you have an appropriate email. It doesn't mean you erase, an email that you had for the last 10, 20 years. It's just don't use it for your resume. Just create a new one. It can be your first name, last name. I mean, be creative in the sense of something that's really basic, because at the end, you don't want to have something that HR managers looking at it is like, well, can I take this person serious? And I've actually had a lot of clients that have applied for jobs, have made it to the interview, and for whatever reason didn't get the job. And then later on ended up getting some feedback. And that wasn't the main reason why they didn't get hired, but it was brought up. We recommend that any future jobs you apply for, that you update your resume and that you put in a different type of email. So I have heard it multiple times, and that's why I'm sharing this with you guys. In addition, for the resume section, you also will have to put the objective, and the objective is mainly focused on what do you want to get out of you applying for this job. So a lot of times, this is confused with what's the summary of what I mentioned earlier, which is the summary that you put in the beginning, which is a recap of your experience in the specific industry or just of your skills. Objective is more, it's a more simplistic way of just saying, my objective is to obtain an opportunity as a registered nurse. And that's pretty much the main goal of your resume. So a lot of employers that are perhaps hiring to they're looking for an entry level employee, we'll probably look at a resume and kind of look at the objective to kind of see if it's very straight to the point or if it's unclear. But I would say that I've seen less of the resumes that have that section of an objective, and rather they do the summary, just because the summary gives them an opportunity to kind of give a little bit more details and talk a little bit more about either your a specific experience doing a specific task or a specific experience in the industry. So I would, if you can, I would stay away from the objective section or just putting objective. I would do more of a summary, but if you do an objective, it's not a big deal. Just make sure that you are very straightforward and you put what the objective of your resume is, which is to, you know, eventually obtain whatever position you're applying for. Another section within the resumes that we discussed previously is a skills and qualifications section, which of course you will talk about your specific skills, whether they're soft skills or hard skills, which I will go into detail so you can differentiate what they are. At the same time, um, the professional experience that you've had working in the different type of roles that you've had, whether it's like I said earlier, you've worked for pay, or if you don't have any professional experience but you have done volunteer work, that is an important thing to definitely note in your resume, because a lot of employers want to see that if someone has not gotten paid doing a specific task, but has maybe 2, 5, 7 years, maybe assisting in childcare or assisting the elderly. Just because you were not getting paid doesn't mean that you were not gaining valuable skills that you can apply for a paying job. So understand that just because this is professional experience doesn't mean that it's specific to a paying job. Of course, you would have to modify that section to say volunteer experience or relevant experience if you just want to emphasize specific experience. But that's something that I always highlight for my clients or anyone that I'm assisting, that as you're structuring your resume and polishing your resume, that's something that you need to always remember. Um, the other section is the education section, where you will talk about your experience. What is the highest education you have? This is one of the sections that I think is very ambiguous when it comes to candidates that perhaps feel like, well, you know what? I didn't even finish high school. What can I put? And I've seen a lot of individuals be very creative with this section. I would not advise you to leave the section blank, especially if you've already listed education as a section or a part of your resume. I would say that you definitely could be creative in the sense that maybe you received a training in CPR. Maybe you received a training in working with um, individuals with disabilities. Just because a training is a week long, a month long, a year long, and it's not a 2 years or 4 years long degree or certification, doesn't mean that it is not valuable. So I've had individuals put that, you know, they're certified. What is it? In the YMCA, they volunteer their time and they have their CPR license. They also have experience working with emotionally distressed children. So sometimes the education is not only your typical, well, I have a degree in this, I have a license in this, I have a certification in this. If you have that, of course, highlight that and put the most relevant and the most relevant and the most up to date certification or degree. But if you don't feel discouraged. Don't feel like, oh well, I'm not going to put anything, or I'm not even going to include an education part. Really, really think hard about what you've done, and I'm pretty sure that everybody has gotten at least an opportunity to. Even nowadays, with so many online trainings and opportunities for you to learn, there's more opportunities for you to have something under your education section. Now, just to dig deeper into the contact information, I think I've already kind of highlighted this. Make sure that the information's accurate and current. Some employers that will contact you will make sure that not only will they give you a call, but they will also send you an email. So make sure that both of those are accurate. For the address, it's really up to you. I personally still use it, but I know that I've gotten probably in the last couple of years, I've gotten a lot of feedback from just clients that I've assisted that have had maybe a bad experience putting their address for whatever reason. And I've also heard from employers sometimes, if they don't have the address, they don't see that as a negative thing, as long as they have a phone number or an email where they can be contacted. So this is really up to you. Like I said, if you feel comfortable, I would still put it. I put my home address. It also sometimes helps when it comes to specific jobs that may not be within your specific neighborhood, and sometimes employers do see that as either beneficial or not. So really think about whether if you're going to put your address or not, or you just want to put the city of San Diego or San Diego, California, and move it along. That's totally fine. That's definitely not a deal breaker, but you will probably start seeing more and more individuals not putting their address there. Phone number, make sure that if you do provide a phone number, that you do have a professional voicemail message. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard HR personnel reach out, say, you know what, I've been trying to get in contact with your client, but I was not able to leave a voicemail because there was a song that was playing during the time, and I didn't even know if the person answered or if that was the voicemail. So I just didn't leave a voicemail. So make sure that you have a professional voicemail, that they're not calling you and all of a sudden they hear a Beyonce song popping up and formulating, that you are, having a correct and proper voicemail so people can take you serious as well. No ringback tones, as I mentioned. And then for the email, I think I've re-emphasized the importance of having a professional and not a silly or inappropriate email. And at the same time, make sure that you use only for, if you are going to provide a specific email, make sure that you use that email specifically for job related activities. And the reason that's important is that sometimes, we get so many emails in our, I guess you could say, your standard email, where sometimes it might get mixed up with other emails. And even if you are checking on a daily basis, you may not get to that email 2 or 3 days after if you're not really clearing all your emails within that day that you check your email. So I always say, and it's free, it's not like you're gonna incur any type of cost. I always say, if you have an email that you use for everything, just create an extra one for you to just use it for your job related activities. So that way, every time you log into that email, you know for a fact that it's only going to be emails for things that have to do with jobs, with opportunities to receive training or anything that's along those lines. Do not, and let me re-emphasize this, do not use the same email that you use for social media. I just got off the phone about 2 weeks ago with one of my clients that was going to be hired as a phlebotomist for the VA, and she was offered the job, but she still had to clear background check. And apparently, the background check also entailed her, personnel from the VA going and doing the research when it came to the type of person this my client was in social media, which is not always a reflection of who the person is, but the reality is her social media was not blocked, and perhaps they saw inappropriate things that didn't really go with the values of the VA, and at the end the client did not get an opportunity to work or remedy the situation, so she missed out on the opportunity. I see this more often nowadays with younger generations just because it's a lot easier to use the same email because you're like, okay, what's the same email I check already? Make sure you don't use the same email. This kind of goes back to the whole create an email that's just focused on job related activities. It will in the long run it will be very very beneficial for you, and it will make sure that you don't have any issues and you won't miss any opportunities moving forward. The objective is kind of the same thing I said. Whether you do a summary or an objective statement, it's the same thing. Just make sure that you customize to each job. So don't send a resume that says, "Well, I want to obtain a job as a office specialist," and then you send it to every company that's hiring for an office specialist, because that's going to be a very generic objective. You want to make it, more of a customized thing. Maybe you say, "Yes, my objective is to receive an opportunity to be an office specialist for UCSD, for Kaiser, for Sempra Energy, or whoever." Or if you want to make it a company specific, that's fine as well. Just don't make it generic. That's definitely not going to be something that's going to thrill a lot of the recruiters or HR personnel that is going to be looking into all the resumes that you received. And if you do a summary, of course, a summary is going to be more, like I said, an opportunity for you to put in more details about your experience. Of course, not in a very, you're not going to write a paragraph either, but it will give you an opportunity to kind of touch on certain things that you think would be important. For example, if someone is applying to be an office specialist, but perhaps doesn't have specific experience in that role and doing those specific tasks. However, the person has worked in management and has done inventories, has a good understanding of different programs such as Microsoft Office and all that. Maybe someone can highlight that importance of working on and using those type of softwares, where that's going to be important for an office specialist, because an office specialist is going to be working with a computer. So there's ways to really navigate that and to really customize your summary or objective as you're structuring your resume for any specific job you're applying for. These are examples of what a good objective section would look like. Um, and what you should emphasize. So, for example, general can be to obtain an administrative assistant positions that would allow me to utilize my 10 years of experience. If you really think about it, this is very generic, because just because you want to obtain an admin position, um, doesn't mean that you're being very specific with either. Maybe there's a different title they use. Maybe the company, you're not stating the company. You're just stating, well, I have 10 years of experience and I want an opportunity as an admin assistant. You can do a general one if that's how you want to start, but you need to get in your comfort zone to kind of start getting a little bit more creative with that. So if you do a specific objective, that's where you would put to obtaining an office assistant position within the finance department of a community organization. So that's more specific. You're talking about, an office assistant position, but you're now talking about that you want to specifically work in a finance department within a community organization. So, maybe you want to work in a CBO, in a community-based organization. So it is important for you to highlight that uh, in the section of the objective, because now you're being very specific. And when the employer sees that, they're like, oh, this person really wants to work for our specific company, and it's not just sending resumes to send them. The second one is also an example of highlighting the employer, such as Cox Communications. And the third one is more about highlighting the skills that someone perhaps has gained as a specific, in this case, a caregiver, that they would like to use to advance within either the industry or within a specific organization. For the summary is going to give you the ability to be more detailed and to kind of, you know, highlight the important skills that you bring to the table. And the reason I said earlier that I feel like a summary is a more comprehensive a way or approach to do a resume is because it gives you an opportunity to just pick and choose what you want to highlight, and at the same time it's you kind of setting up the foundation for anyone that's reading your resume to kind of, it's like the hook to hook them into reading the rest of your resume. So if they see something in the summary that captures their attention, like for example, this is in this example they're talking about having admin work and having 3 years of experience working offering office management skills, and they are proficient in Microsoft Office programs. Perhaps the employer that's looking to hire is looking for someone that's really proficient with Microsoft Office. So within a specific, if you were to do a general or specific objective, you might not be able to highlight that as easily as doing a summary. So by doing that, now you kind of pique the interest of the HR personnel or recruiter, and now they're going to take a little bit more time to read your resume. And by doing that, it's just you're kind of allowing them to kind of see what else you bring to the table, and that's what you want. Ultimately, you want people to spend time looking at your resume and saying, "Oh my God, this person has what I'm looking for." And that's why I always highlight to my clients that the summary, I feel, in my experience in the industry, has giving and also from my recruiter perspective and reviewing resumes and myself, it gives a better sense of the applicant, and it allows you to kind of get a quick snapshot, and then after you get that snapshot, then you go and kind of start getting more into details regarding the resume, the experience, and the education. So a summary will definitely take you further in that sense. Now, for the section of skills, this is one of the things that I like to spend a little bit more time when I do this resume, when I do this workshop, because I think there's always that confusion about, well, skills, I have X amount of skills. It is important for you to know and be able to differentiate what type of skills you have. If you have hard skills or if you have soft skills, being able to emphasize either hard skills or either hard skills or soft skills in a resume is going to be crucial for you to be able to really highlight what you bring to the table. So, having said that, specifically for hard skills, the examples is it's something that pretty much you're able to show that you have. In other words, a certification, for example, is a great example. If you took a specific training that you can say, you know what, I took a typing training. I went and I applied to get my typing certification, and you say, yes, I'm able to type X amount of words per minute. That's a hard skill, because if it came down to it and they're like, okay, well, you're saying you can type 45 words per minute or 55 or 60. Do you have something to back that up? Especially if you say you have a typing certificate, you could say, yes, I have this to prove you that I do have this skill. And that's what is a hard skill, something that you can actually prove that you have. The examples that are used here is more than 10 years of progressive administrative experience. That's something you can prove. You can prove that you've worked in that specific role or in the industry for more than 10 years. Same thing as the proficiency in Microsoft Word. Maybe you have a certificate in certificate of completion for Excel, Outlook, and Word. So that would be considered a hard skill because you can verify that. You can provide proof that you do have that. Same thing. The same thing is for the CPR and AED card. It's a training you received, a skill that you learned that you're able to provide proof for. Now, for soft skills, it's a little bit more of where I feel a lot of people are a little bit more confused about. Soft skill is more about what skills do you have that are fall within the category of being able to work with others, for example, being an honest and reliable person, having excellent verbal and written communication skills. Those are skills that you state that you have that you could potentially exhibit, but it would be really, really hard for you to prove with like an actual certification document. It's something that you could exhibit. You are reliable. How do you exhibit that? Well, you know what? In the last 5 years I worked for this employer, I've never been late. Of course, that's what you're stating. There's really no way for me to verify that, but I'll take your word for it. If you're honest and reliable, fine. If you're a team player, great. As you can see, those are skills that are more along the lines of what you are disclaiming to the employer that's looking at your resume. But of course, there's skills that you feel that closely align with your personality, your ability to work in a specific environment. So please make sure that when you're putting skills within the skills section in a resume, that you're able to differentiate what you have. Don't put hard skills and soft skills together. Make sure that you put those into different compartments or different sections, so employers are able to kind of see that, one, you have an understanding of what hard skills and soft skills are, but more importantly, that you're able to know for yourself that, maybe you do have excellent verbal and written communication. Um, Maybe you're also a very outspoken person and like to communicate very upfront with anyone. You don't like to sugarcoat things. Of course, there's ways to definitely reflect that on your resume, but please do make sure that you differentiate both of them as you're working on this section. For the professional experience section, of course, here we like I personally say that a maximum of 3 is fine. If you have 5 jobs that you've held in that specific role, so let's say you've been a property manager and you have worked for 5 different employers, then at that time, I think I would see it suitable for you to definitely highlight those 5 work experiences when you work on a professional experience section. But if you're just working on your work experience, I would say stick to 3, just so you don't drag your resume and then it gets to a point where it kind of gets diluted with the rest of the work experience that you're trying to highlight. When you do work on a professional experience section, please make sure that you do list the most relevant professional experience first, and then, of course, the less relevant at the end. Include volunteer and unpaid experience, which I have highlighted earlier. I cannot say how important that is, especially when it comes to opportunities where certain employers are looking for people that maybe, even if they do have experience and getting paid doing that, they're looking for people that are more about the community, or they're more about volunteering their time. And they might be looking for someone that has a vast experience volunteering with different organizations. So definitely include that. This is a great example of what to put when you're working on a professional experience section. Um, as you see the name of the employer, the city, the date range, and then the actual role that you were serving, and then kind of a breakdown as to how to describe what type of skill or task you were performing in that role. So observed and reported any suspicious activity to police, patrolled, wrote. I always say that when you start a specific sentence in that section, you have to be as descriptive as possible. You have to use those keywords because that's what really captures a recruiter's attention. And sometimes with the bigger companies that have, I don't know, 400, 500 plus employees, a lot of the HR departments use, I know that for us specifically, the SDHC, the Housing Commission uses a service where they put in the resumes through a system that kind of does the initial screening. And if that screening doesn't capture keywords from your resume, you won't even make it to someone's desk. So I always say, you know what, especially in these difficult times, make sure that when you are working in your resume and really trying to have a solidified resume with all the things that you've done and the skill sets you bring to the table, that you do use those powerful adjectives and words that are really going to capture the attention, especially when it comes to jobs that are going to entail you working with others. So I always recommend that you get the job description and kind of match it up with what you already know for a fact that you have experience with. That way you can get a better sense of what you need to be writing in your resume, or at least tweaking, so you have a more of a competitive edge. The education section kind of just reinforcing, of course, if you have your high school or college education, vocational education, certifications. Nowadays, you don't have to put the date when you graduated. Some people still do that. I've heard feedback from different clients that they just don't feel comfortable. They feel that if they were to put that they graduated from 1975, that maybe they might not be given the opportunity. A lot of data suggests that that's not the case, but people have gone and experienced different things. So graduation date is not needed. For college education, um, if it's something that you just got, for example, if you just got your master's, I would say definitely emphasize that. But same thing, you can put, you have your degree from this university and you have this certification, and this is a vocational school that you got your license from. But you don't have to put the date for the graduation. You do have to put for if you did a vocational training, you do have to put the range and when you obtain your license. Same thing applies for the certifications, but at least for the high school specifically, you don't have to put the date when you graduated. And this is just another example how to emphasize that for the community college example. As you can see, they did put a month in a year, but they just put that they got their Associate of Science degree, offers procedure. Same thing for San Diego State, and then for the certification and from the American Red Cross, same concept, just the month and date. I mean the month and year, and the type of either certification or degree. This is what a finished product should be looking at, how it should look, whether you decide to do the functional or the chronological or just the standard. At the end, depending on what you feel comfortable, and also probably the most significant is depending on what type of job or what industry you're going to be applying for. Um, this one has the summary in the beginning. It has the work experience. They only have, in this example, at least two past work experiences. I would say three would probably be better, unless they don't have it, then you don't have to put anything, of course. And then the education and the additional qualifications. If you are bilingual, that is something definitely that you would put in the additional qualifications segment, because that is sometimes very important when it comes to certain positions you're applying for. Any questions regarding today's presentation? If you have a question, please unmute yourself, or if you don't feel comfortable asking the question, you can send me your question via chat. Wow, no questions. Okay, that's the first one. That's the first.
You were very thorough, I think. You gave a lot of really good information. Great presentation.
Yeah.
Thank
Good
you.
job. Mm-hmm.
You're going to work on the resume right now.
Perfect. Perfect. And you know what? I do, before I let you guys go, for those of you that need assistance, please do reach out to your WRS. That's why we're here. I would say that if you start working on like the structure, the bones of the resume, definitely we can be that extra set of eyes. And I always say, when I help my clients, it's good for me to first see what you already have. If you have something, of course, if you don't have anything, then we're starting from scratch. But if you do have something, even if you feel that, oh well, it's not the best quality, let's start from that and let's build from that. Because I think that sometimes you might have some valuable information that maybe, of course, with some tweaking, could be really relevant as you are structuring and developing a really good, solid resume for you to be able to use in any job for that matter, as long as you tailor it for that specific role.
Thank you so much. This is John C. This was a wonderful presentation.
You're welcome, John C.
Thank you.
No problem. Let me see here. I do see Denise.
Sayles. Sayles.
Do you know who your WRS is? That sounds very familiar.
Me.
Maybe. Oh, okay. Okay. Because I'm like, it sounds very familiar. I'm like, maybe I've worked with her. Okay, so you okay. So then Juanita, I see that you put okay, perfect. Perfect. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, thank you for joining us at today's presentation. I hope this was very valuable. Please do stay tuned to what we offer throughout the month of February and moving forward. Like I said earlier, we really strive to offer workshops that are really going to help you, especially in today's market. And if there is anything that perhaps you would like to see and that we just haven't done, we're always happy to hear what type of workshops you guys would like to see, and we can kind of go back to the drawing board and see if we can make that happen. Thank you for your time, everyone. And if you have any questions, please do reach out to your WRS. If you don't have a WRS, I'm going to put my contact information here, and you're welcome to reach out to me.
As an FYI, Jonathan, Rosario is Sotelo,
Okay.
and Lupita is Ponce.
Oh, thank you for that. Okay. And you said Ponce, Lupita Ponce, and Rosario. What was that, Rosario?
Sotelo.
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 Okay. Well, perfect. Thank you, Juanita, and thank you everyone for joining us today.
Bye. Thanks, Jonathan. This was wonderful. You take care.
You too. Bye-bye, you guys.
Bye.